Westminster. This is Terry Hawkins from Cafe 10 West. I'd like to welcome you back to my home kitchen to share some virtual fellowship today with a cup of tea and some sweet treats. I've set the table for a high tea, a little cup of tea and a gossip with a friend, and I've included some typical tea time treats. We've got some tea sandwiches, some sweets, and scones. So what we're going to talk about today is scones. You may have noticed that Cafe 10 West always has at least one variety of scone on the menu. It's something that's very simple to make and that I enjoy making. So we're going to talk about scones today, and I'm making a chocolate chip scone. It seems to be a favorite at the cafe. I'm using a recipe from King Arthur Flour, and we'll include a link to that website with this video. So let's get started. Let's get right to it. Start out with 2 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, or if you can get it, pastry flour. Pastry flour has a lower protein content, and you'll end up with a much more tender pastry. To that, I'm going to add 1/3 cup of sugar. What a scone is basically a slightly sweet baking powder biscuit. So if you've ever made biscuits, you'll have no trouble with scones. In here, I have 3/4 cup of salt and 1 tablespoon of baking powder. My mother would have put all of this through a sifter to blend it together. I like to use a whisk. Okay, so just make sure that that is blended together. And now I need to go off to the refrigerator and get our cold ingredients. For this recipe, we're going to put in 1 stick of unsalted butter. Now, I've already chopped my stick of butter into pea-sized pieces, and then I put it back in the refrigerator to get it cold, because we don't want these to stick together. We want to distribute the butter through the flour, but we don't want to break it up completely. So I'm tossing that in there. And then you can use your hands to break up the bigger pieces, or you can do what my mother used to do and use the back of a spoon to just sort of smash the pieces. I think the hands are easier. So I am just grabbing those lumps of butter and squeezing it into a little leaf shape. So I'm just going to go through here and make sure there aren't any big pieces. And this takes a few minutes. So you want chunks of butter because that makes it tender and flaky. But you don't want big globs, because what I found is that then they just melt on your baking sheet and you lose the butter. Okay. Toss it all together. I think we'll stop there. But normally I would work through this a little bit more and make sure there aren't any really large lumps. Okay. Now for the wet ingredients. Just get this mess off my hands for a minute. Okay, so the wet ingredients are, before I add them, I want to add a cup of chocolate chips. I've got Wilbur brand mini chocolate chips. You can also get Toll House. Use the mini chips because they work better in a scone. One of the reasons I chose the chocolate chip scone is because it doesn't use any exotic ingredients like dried fruits or cardamom or some of the spices that I like. This is pretty simple, and your kids will like them too. So then we put in a cup of chocolate chips. Toss that in there. And some of those butter pieces are a little bit large. Okay. Now I'm going to get them wet ingredients ready. So 2 eggs. And I know you're supposed to crack each egg into a separate cup. I only have 2 eggs here. I'm taking a risk. And then break those up with a whisk. 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And I forgot a really important step, turning on the oven. I'm going to preheat my oven to 450 degrees. Okay, so now I'm mixing the vanilla in with the egg. And you can use milk or half and half. The recipe from King Arthur says to use 1/2 to 2/3 cup of milk or half and half. I like to use heavy cream. And I just fill it up to the 1 cup mark. In this case, that's going to be a little bit more than half a cup. That should be fine. Okay, so I'm blending this together with my whisk. And then it just all goes into the wet ingredients, or the dry ingredients. Okay, and let me get these things out of the way. Now the next step is important. You don't want to overmix the scone. Just like you wouldn't want to overmix pie crust or biscuit dough. You just want to fold the wet and the dry ingredients together so that things start to come together. I used a clear bowl today so that I can show you that I'm just mixing it until I don't have any dry bits of flour in the bottom. And that should do. Oh, I want to get all this goodness. Now the next step you could do directly on a parchment lined pan, but I have this nifty rolling mat, so I'm going to use this. I'm going to wash my hands before I put them in the batter that we're going to eat. It is an important step. Okay, so now I'm back to shaping the scones. I need 1 tool. Okay, so I've got some extra flour in here. I'm going to put it on my rolling mat. And then I'm going to scoop all of this out. Kind of crumbly, but that's going to change very quickly when I get my hands into it. So what I want to do is just gently pull it together and give it a few quick folds until it's all uniform. I can use a little bit more flour. don't want it to stick to my hands, but I don't want to knead it like bread dough. And I can see some really big bits of butter in there. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to divide this in half. And then each half I'm going to make into a circle. Now conveniently my mat has a 6-inch circle marked on it, but it doesn't have to be exact. Okay, so it should be roughly 6 inches around and about 3/4 to 1 inch thick. And at this point you can brush the whole thing with milk and sprinkle it with sparkling sugar. I tend to cut mine first and then brush them with the milk. So I'm going to divide this into 6 pieces. And now that you've seen me do this, you know why the scones at Cafe 10 West are not exactly uniform, because I do this by eye. And I'm going to put them on my baking sheet. And then repeat the same thing with the other round. The other thing that I do at Cafe 10 West is that I make the scones a little bit smaller. I divide my dough into thirds so that I make 18 instead of 12. That way you can have 2. And this is all by feel. I want it to be a soft dough, but I don't want it to be sticky. So I'm just rolling it around in a little bit of flour to keep it from being too sticky. You could do this with a knife. I can't use a knife on my rolling mat. I'm going to get some milk. And a pastry brush. And I'm just going to put a little milk on top of each scone so that I can put on some sparkling sugar. The recipe from King Arthur Flour says that you can put these in the freezer at this point and chill them for 30 minutes. I've tried doing that. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference.
How long are we baking this?
I'm starting it for 20 minutes. And I'll turn on the light so that we can keep an eye on them. Okay. Time to take out the scones. They have all run together, but that's okay.
You don't need to wait for them to cool, you just...
No, I take them right off. And usually I just slide the whole piece of parchment off. I always do that at church because I can put them right on the stainless steel island. Okay, and one other tip that I have for you when you make your scones, if you have a linen tea towel, wrap them up in the tea towel and let them cool like that for a little while. And that's it. Hope to see you at Cafe 10 West soon. Bye-bye.